A lot was riding on the performance of one of Henry's great warships, the Mary Rose.
On July 19, 1545, King Henry VIII stood on a castle wall and watched his favorite warship, the Mary Rose, vanish into the ocean in less than 5 minutes. For nearly half a millennium, that disaster remained a mystery. Then divers finally reached the seabed and uncovered something far more disturbing than the sinking itself. Out of around 390 men who died, 179 sets of human remains were recovered. But the real shock came when scientists ran DNA and isotope tests on the crew. Because what they found challenged everything we thought we knew about the British Navy, and even about Tudor history itself. Also, buried inside that evidence was a clue that finally explains why the Mary Rose actually sank. And it's not what you think. To understand this story, we need to go back to the day when the sea swallowed one of the most powerful warships in the British Navy. The King's favorite ship, July 19, 1545. England was at war with France, and this was far from a small clash. Across the English Channel, between the south coast of England and the Isle of Wight, a huge French invasion fleet was gathering. Nearly 200 ships, carrying around 30,000 soldiers, moving together with one clear purpose: to invade England and take control of its coast. Years later, it would even be compared to the Spanish Armada. And on the English side, facing all of this, there was one ship standing in the front line, the Mary Rose. She was not just another vessel in the water. She was the pride of King Henry VIII's navy, one of the first true purpose-built warships in English history. She was named after Henry's sister, Mary Tudor, and the Rose, the symbol of the Tudor dynasty, a name that carried pride, power, and expectation. When she was first built in 1510, she was a lighter carrack, around 500 tons, designed for speed and early naval combat. But in 1536, Henry ordered a major rebuild. The ship was upgraded into a 700-ton war machine, built to carry the newest and heaviest bronze cannons, muzzle-loading guns that could destroy enemy ships within minutes. After this upgrade, the Mary Rose became one of the most powerful warships of its time. But unfortunately, this same upgrade would later become one of the biggest reasons behind the entire disaster. On the morning of the battle, Vice Admiral Sir George Carew commanded the Mary Rose, one of the trusted leaders of the English fleet. King Henry VIII stood watching the fleet. Beside him was Lady Mary Carew, watching her husband sail into battle. From where they stood, everything still looked under control. Cannons ready, men in position, the strongest ship of England leading the line. But what King Henry VIII never expected was that, within minutes, his favorite ship would turn into one of the most painful and shocking naval disasters in history. The 5-minute chaos. When the battle began, for a moment it felt like the sea itself was against England. The English fleet struggled to move with power, while the French ships stayed mobile, circling and striking from a distance. A light breeze shifted across the water. For Vice Admiral Sir George Carew, he ordered the Mary Rose forward. The ship answered immediately, moving into firing range. Her heavy bronze cannons on the starboard side opened fire, shaking the deck with power. For a brief moment, everything seemed to be going as planned. A normal war move, but one that needed perfect timing in a crowded battlefield. And that's where everything slipped. The lower starboard gun ports were still open. It should have been standard procedure to close them before turning, but in the chaos of battle, it was missed. As the ship turned, it began to heel to one side, but the Mary Rose was already carrying the weight of her past rebuild. Extra cannons, extra structure, extra pressure sitting low in the hull. So even though the tilt was small, only about 40 centimeters, the sea hit the open ports, and in an instant, water rushed inside. Not slowly, but like a sudden break in a wall. The weight inside the hull changed immediately. The ship dropped deeper on one side, pulling itself further into the water with every second. Inside the hull, the real collapse began. Heavy bronze cannons, still tied but strained from firing, they rolled across the sloping deck, crashing through wooden beams, smashing into men, destroying anything in their path. It took less than 5 minutes from the first tilt, so fast that many ships nearby didn't even understand. From the castle wall, King Henry VIII watched it happen in real time. Moments earlier, he had been calm and even smiling. But as the Mary Rose began to tip, his expression changed, and he went completely silent as the ship vanished. But even in that moment of collapse, one question still remained unanswered. Even if the ship sank, why did around 390 men die so suddenly? Why didn't they escape or make it out in time? That answer would not come from the sinking itself, but from something hidden deep inside the ship's own design. The hidden killer inside. Remember the 1536 upgrade? That moment when the Mary Rose was rebuilt from a lighter 500-ton carrack into a massive 700-ton war machine. It made her stronger than anything England had ever sailed. But it also changed something deeper. The extra cannons, the reinforced structure, the added weight, all of it pushed the ship lower into the water, that her lowest gun ports were sitting just about 40 centimeters above the sea line. But more than all of those upgrades, the death of nearly 390 men was caused by something far more overlooked. A full structure stretched across the entire upper deck of the ship. To understand why it existed, we need to go back to how naval battles were actually fought in that time. Ships didn't just destroy each other from a distance with cannons. Cannons were used to damage sails, break wooden frames, and weaken enemy movement. But the real goal was always the same. Soldiers would try to physically jump from one ship to another and fight hand-to-hand on the deck. That was where battles were won or lost. Ships like the Mary Rose used thick hemp rope netting stretched tightly across the open upper deck. If enemy soldiers tried to board, they would land on this net instead of the deck. They would get tangled in it, suspended in the air, completely exposed. And from below, soldiers could attack them easily. But on the Mary Rose that day, everything came together in the worst possible way. Because of the 1536 rebuild, the ship was already heavier and sitting deeper in the water. So when it finally tilted during battle, that same netting stopped being protection. It became something else entirely. The deck was no longer a flat surface. It had turned into a steep wall. Men, already in panic, moved toward the light above, but instead of freedom, they hit thick hemp rope and got trapped. Archaeological findings later showed skeletons tightly clustered along the upper deck area, exactly where this netting had been fixed, not scattered randomly through the ship, but compressed against one structural point, as if they had all reached the same final barrier. So when the Mary Rose sank, that net stopped being a defensive system. It became an inescapable trap across the entire upper deck. And within just minutes of the sinking, around 390 of the 415 men on board were dead. Now, with all of this, we finally understand what killed nearly 400 men so quickly. But one question still remained unanswered. What actually caused the ship to tip over in the first place? We mentioned the sudden breeze. We mentioned the design problems, but no one could prove exactly what had happened that day. The real answer would remain buried beneath the waters of the Solent for the next 437 years. And before we reach that answer, we first need to see what happened during those long centuries after the sinking. The failed attempts. The Mary Rose was gone, but King Henry VIII was not willing to leave it there. He wanted his ship back. He brought in specialist salvage experts from Venice, Italy, some of the most experienced recovery divers in Europe at the time. They were promised huge rewards if they could raise the Mary Rose from the seabed. Divers descended to the wreck and attached thick hemp cables. Those cables were then connected to two large cargo vessels. The idea was to use the rising tide itself as a giant lifting force. As the water rose, the ships would pull upward. But there was one problem. The Solent had already claimed the ship. In the weeks after the sinking, mud had begun sealing itself around the hull like wet concrete. The wreck was trapped. When the lifting attempt began, the ship did not move. Instead, the strain snapped the Mary Rose's masts clean off. After several failed attempts, only a few guns and pieces of equipment were recovered. Eventually, Henry gave up. By 1549, the rescue effort was officially abandoned. And with that, the Mary Rose disappeared beneath history. Strong currents pushed the wreck deeper into the seabed. The exposed side slowly rotted away, eaten by shipworms and damaged by the moving water. But the other side sank deep into soft mud, where almost no oxygen could reach it. That meant very little decomposition, allowing parts of the ship to remain preserved for centuries. Then, nearly 300 years later, the Mary Rose suddenly returned. In 1836, local fishermen began complaining that their nets kept snagging on something beneath the water. Their reports brought two brothers to the area, John and Charles Deane, pioneers of one of the world's first practical diving helmets. Wearing heavy copper helmets and thick canvas suits, they descended into the darkness below. What they found was astonishing: the wreck of the Mary Rose. The brothers recovered cannons, timber, and personal belongings from the ship. Some of the discoveries were even displayed to the public in London. For a moment, it looked like the Mary Rose had finally been found again. But the technology of the time simply wasn't good enough. No one could recover the entire ship. Also, the Deane brothers eventually ran out of money. The Mary Rose vanished for a second time. And this time, she would remain hidden for more than a century, until a search began that would finally bring Henry VIII's lost warship back to the surface. Recovery of the Mary Rose. For more than 4 centuries, the Mary Rose sat hidden beneath the waters of the Solent. But in 1965, one man became obsessed with finding her. His name was Alexander McKee, a historian and diver who launched a project called Project Solent Ships. Officially, the team was searching for various lost vessels in the area. Unofficially, McKee was hunting for the Mary Rose. Many experts thought it was a waste of time. Some believed the ship was gone forever. Then technology changed everything. Using a new type of side-scan sonar, researchers detected something unusual beneath the flat seabed. A large shape completely hidden under the mud. It looked promising, but nobody knew for sure. The breakthrough finally came on May 1st, 1971. A diver named Percy Ackland descended into the dark water, the vertical oak timbers of a Tudor warship. After 426 years, the Mary Rose had finally been found. What followed became one of the largest underwater archaeological projects. Over the next several years, more than 500 volunteer divers carried out around 28,000 dives on the site. Most of the time, visibility was less than a few inches, so archaeologists placed a giant grid over the wreck and mapped it square by square, carefully recording every timber, cannon, tool, and artifact they found. Even Prince Charles, who later became King Charles III, joined the project and personally dived at the wreck site. Then came the most dangerous step of all: raising the ship itself. Engineers knew they couldn't simply pull it from the mud. To solve the problem, divers drilled through the ship underwater and attached it to a specially designed steel lifting frame. Finally, on October 11, 1982, a massive floating crane slowly pulled the wreck upward. Millions of people watched the live broadcast as the Mary Rose rose toward the surface for the first time since 1545. At one point, part of the lifting frame suddenly failed and crashed down with a loud bang, nearly turning the entire operation into a disaster. And moments later, the Mary Rose finally broke through the surface of the water. The same ship Henry VIII had watched disappear 437 years earlier had returned. And now, it was about to reveal some of the most unexpected and shocking details that had remained hidden for centuries. What the wreck revealed. What archaeologists found inside was not just a wreck, but frozen moments from 1545. They recovered around 179 sets of human remains, carefully preserved in the mud. But experts believe there were about 415 men on board the ship on the day it sank. That means more than half of the crew was never recovered, lost forever to currents, decay, and the open sea. On the lower gun decks, archaeologists made one of the most shocking discoveries. Gunners were found lying directly beneath their own cannons. These multi-ton bronze and iron guns had broken loose during the collapse, crushing the men who were still at their stations. Elsewhere, bodies were found in tight clusters, not scattered randomly, but grouped in sudden, panicked positions, showing how quickly escape routes collapsed. Near the carpenter's cabin, they found something smaller, a dog, a young terrier cross later named Hatch. He had been kept on board to catch rats. Like the crew, he was trapped below decks and drowned during the sinking. Then came the archers. These were elite specialists, trained from childhood to use the English longbow, a weapon requiring draw weights between 100 and 180 pounds. Their skeletons told that story clearly. The left arm, used to draw the bow, was significantly thicker than the right. Their spines were twisted and fused from years of extreme physical strain. Even their collarbones showed permanent deformation. Their bodies had been reshaped by war. But the biggest surprise came from science. Isotope and DNA testing of teeth revealed something unexpected. Around 30 to 40% of the crew were not from England. Some came from Spain and Portugal, others from Mediterranean regions. One of the most famous figures, the Archer Royal, was traced back to North African origins, likely the Atlas region. That means the Mary Rose was not just an English warship. It was a mixed international crew drawn from across Europe and beyond. For centuries, Tudor records had painted a simpler picture of a purely English navy. But the bones told a different truth. And now it's time to answer the most fundamental question. Why the Mary Rose sank? What actually made such a powerful warship sink within minutes? Let's take a look at them one by one. The first one is the sudden wind theory, and it is linked to that major upgrade in 1536. According to historical accounts in England, the ship was already very heavy and sitting low in the water. So when a sudden gust of wind hit during its turn, it pushed the ship beyond its balance point. But another theory is about the crew, and it says something entirely different. Some historians mention that the crew wasn't fully coordinated and orders were not properly followed. Critical steps like closing the lower gun ports may have been missed in the rush of firing and turning. And the third one is what you might have also thought of at least once: the enemy fire theory. According to some French historians, the ship may have been hit by French cannon fire during the battle in the Solent, which contributed to its damage and eventual sinking. A cannonball was later recovered from the wreck, which is often used to support this idea. So what actually happened? Today, most experts agree it was not just one reason. It was a combination. A sudden shift in wind, a heavily loaded, unstable design, low gun ports sitting dangerously close to the water, and a sharp maneuver at exactly the wrong moment. One triggered the next, until water entered the ship, cannons broke loose, and the balance collapsed beyond recovery. And once that chain began, there was no time to stop it. The Mary Rose didn't sink slowly. It disappeared within just 5 minutes. And even more surprising, people spent nearly 500 years trying to figure out why the Mary Rose sank at all. So this was the story of the Mary Rose, one of the most famous and powerful ships in British history. And after hearing it all, what do you think? What really happened that day? And what are the pieces we are still missing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you don't want to miss more true and incredible stories like this, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next one.